So today's job, or maybe the next few days' job, is to get the kind of transmission in. So this front end here with the chain, clutch, etc. there. And I think some of the things I need to do, we're going to use some of the studs for the tool. So I think what I'm going to do is quickly fit a new set of studs all the way around, and then I can do the front end, front sprocket, rear sprocket, chain guide. So that's going to be the next. Got all the studs in, they went really easily. So based on pretty much every recommendation I've read, seen, whatever, for the chain tension, I've gone for the Casa Performance X44 OTT. The reason that this seems to be the go-to is that once you've mounted the backing plate, you don't have to then keep undoing the threads into the casing to adjust the chain. They're staying, I can Loctite those in. This then sits on top of it and can be adjusted, so it's a bit easier on the kind of relatively fragile threads in the case. Sorted, and now we'll put the actual tensioner on. It's going to go somewhere like that. I'm not going to do this up tight at the moment. So, little job done. Still turning with that. So the next job, I think, is going to be kind of prepping front sprocket, rear sprocket, and then dropping the chain in. Okay, so I think I've got the bits and bobs together to fit on the kind of transmission. So I've got, for the front sprocket, there's a oil thrower goes on first, then the sprocket itself. I'm then going to stop. I'm then going to the rear end on the gearbox. I'm going to fit. Originally there were two shims under the old clutch. One's thicker than the other. It says in the book normally there's one, sometimes there's two. It's to do with getting the chain alignment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit just the thicker one only, then the rear sprocket, and at the same time put the rear sprocket on with the chain and the front sprocket. We'll have a little bit of a regroup then and see if that's worked okay. So first thing is this oil thrower, thin washer, right down and on, perfect. And then we're going to fit, just double checking the book, dished oil thrower, then the sprocket sleeve, so that needs to mesh like a saw. It seems fine and dandy. And then at the front end I'm going to fit, first of all, just this thicker single spacer. Let's see if this one's going to work. We've then got it's going to be going on front sprocket with this brass bush, which is going to go inside there, probably with a little dab of oil. It's there, right. So what I now need to do, what I now want to do is try and get front sprocket, chain and rear sprocket on together. And just for interest, because I'm to get in the gear ratios I want at the end, this is not a 15 tooth, it's a 17 tooth front sprocket, which by my calculations means my normal is it 46 tooth, I think, stand to be corrected, rear sprocket plus my original gearbox will give me the final gear ratios that I want. But in order, because this is slightly this is two tooth bigger, I need a chain. Instead of an 80 link chain, I need an 81 link chain, and as you can, I don't know how well you can see that, you can just see the extra kind of half link added in. So this is going to be the fiddly bit to try and get all this on in one go. So we have there and there. So it's about like that. So that looks okay. And we'll now add the clutch spider into that, the rest of the cush drive onto there, and then we'll measure the chain. So we have a sliding dog, so this curves fit with that curves there. So we've got the cush drive spring which sits there. Then we've got the kind of cap of the cush drive, and these splines here need to line up with those splines on the sleeve as we tighten the nut down. So I can kind of see them there, and I can probably see them around the outside. I've got my original, in fact all of this cush drive is original apart from the new spindle, so it all looks to be good stuff. So just tighten that in a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is fit the clutch spindle at front, which means I can then lock the clutch, which means I can then tighten that, and once it's basically tightened, I'm going to check how the chain lines up this end compared to this end, and is it in line. Okay, at the clutch end we have our centre spider, needs to slide on into that brass bush. Jubbly, all turning nice. We are going to eventually have, I'll sort it out properly later, but we've got my sort of tab washer, and I don't know if this comes out on camera, but 1, 2, 3, 4 of these rivets are completely flat and one of them is raised up, and the raised up one goes through that hole, so that tab washer goes there, and eventually when all this is done and the nut is done up, we bend up those corners of the tab washer, which stops your clutch from coming undone. So we're going to so that's now starting to move. So what I need to do is fit a clutch holding tool, which will push against one of these studs, holds that in place, I can torque that, I can torque the front spindle, and when everything's done up correctly I can then measure how straight my chain is. Okay, so the idea is here, this tool will locate in part of the spider like that, and then this bottom arm will lock against one of these engine studs, which means the clutch can't spin round, so I can tighten that up, and also while that's then locked I can then tighten up the spindle at the front end. I'm not going to go for a fancy torque setting for now, I'm literally just going to get it snugged down, and will do. And then at the other end, again, the clutch is still held in place, and the chain will then hold this in place. And this one, you just got to make sure that those splines are lining up. Now this is one of the bits where if I'd done this before, I'd know how much I can do this, or whether I was doing it right. I think I'm going to need the cam holding tool. It could be this was absolutely fine, but I just can't tell because I've got no experience of doing this. I think if I just put a little mark on this outer cap where the holes are, and then I can look down the side of the spring and I can see where the splines are, and am I getting both of those to line up. Once it's in position, it does actually slide on quite easily, but the spring gives it a lot of tension. So I'm going to mark the middle of some of these gaps. There's one there, there's one there, right, so at least I know where the holes are. Put that back in. What I want to try and do, if you can see through the spring, you can see where the splines are, and these dots on the top correspond to the holes on there, so I need a spline on there lined up with a hole dot on the top there. So that's what I'm going to try and do. It does say in the book about getting it tension and just give it some gentle taps. I felt like it suddenly clicked in then. That's it. I can feel that now going on. There's definitely an obvious moment when it all lined up. So again, I'm not going to do this mega tight. That will do just to hold everything in place. So we have a gearbox that's turning, we have a clutch and we have a chain and we have a front sprocket. So what I need to do next, I need to make sure that the chain is running, as you look down the engine, it's running exactly straight. It's not either this end is higher than this end, that will be bad, or this end is higher than this end. So I think the way to do it is to get a straight edge across there and measure where the teeth are, and do the same thing over here, measure across there and where the teeth are, and that will hopefully tell us whether we've got a straight chain or not. Right, so we're going to do some measuring to see where the chain is at. So I've got a straight ruler, and I've measured the thickness all the way along with the calipers, and it's dead straight. So if I put that across the crankcases and slide it down until it just touches the chain, and get some measurements. So that's right, and then we'll do the same kind of thing at this front end. So I think what I'm going to do, if that extra shim that I had, I think is a 0.5 millimeter shim. So if I put that underneath the clutch, underneath the rear sprocket, that's going to lift that out by, I think it's either 0.4 or 0.5 of a millimeter, which means those numbers are going to drop slightly. So it'll be more like 33 millimeters instead of 33.5, and this one is at around about 32.5. So there's going to be somewhere in the region of 0.5 millimeter front to back. Doesn't sound too bad to me, but I think I'm going to put that extra washer shim back in underneath there. Okay, get some tension on that again. Okie dokie, so we're going to have another measure now. We're going to do the same kind of thing across the top, around the back, down there, and then do the same on the front. So this has now got the extra shim. So if we have a look at these new figures, the rear sprocket has moved out by kind of 0.5 millimeter. The front sprocket has basically stayed the same, so we've reduced the gap, the difference between front and rear, we've reduced it to about 0.5 millimeter. So I think I'm going to go with that. I'm sure somebody can leave me a comment if that is still too far out. I just don't know what the tolerance is for that, really. Right, and just as the light is running out, I've just torqued down the two nuts, and the final thing to do is to bend this tab washer up so that it seals against that inner nut and stops anything from coming loose. Right, that nut is not coming undone. So we now have a drive chain in place. It's all torqued down, it's all working. The only thing I haven't done, which I need to remember, is that the chain guide is not correct as yet. So that'll be one of my jobs to do next. Took a bit longer than expected, but we have it done. Right, just going to try and sort out the tension on the chain using this guide. And the book, it says turn the chain by using the rear sprocket so that all the slack is in the top and the bottom of the chain is tighter. So if I do that, that means the bottom chain is tight, and the bottom of the chain is tight, and all the slack is up here. So I now want to raise this up. I'll just very lightly tack it. Yeah. So the idea is between the chain guide and the front sprocket, with all the tension at the bottom, we should have about 6 mm of movement. That looks 6 mm. So tighten those up a little bit more. Tension in the bottom. Looks pretty much 6 mm. Okay, so chain is tightened up, so we're now going to fit the clutch. So I think the correct order is some new springs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We then need to fit the kind of inner flange which drops on, and then the clutch plates and the clutch steels. I've got some new steels, and I've got some new clutch plates. It's been soaking in oil overnight. They go on, fill that up, and then finally a new circlip to lock it all into place. To fit it, didn't need this for the Vespa, but I've got a clutch compressor tool, so that bolts onto there, and I'm going to, so that I don't damage the mating surface, I'm going to put some washers on these 4 studs, and right. That's better. Just trying to work it out. I think I'm going to have to put the cork and the steel onto this first before I put the compressor on, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to fit them in. So that acts as the bottom steel, that's fine. So we then have a cork, and then this is the top one, because it's got a, don't know, it'll show up on camera, but it's actually kind of rounded slightly on the upper side. And there. So now I need to compress it, and then I need to slide each of those in individually. Well, that all seems to go together quite nicely. The only snag is that the top cork plate, the kind of ear bit that holds it in place, is right, it's only just inside the actual clutch housing area. And it does say in the book that if when assembled the ears of your cork clutch plates are very near to the top of the slots in the sprocket, it is permissible to bend the ears of the cork plates down a little so that they can't pop out. So I'm just wondering whether, to play it safe, I need to ease things off, get a hold of this final clutch plate back out and gently bend down the ears so that it just engages that extra, I don't know what, millimetre, just to make sure that they're not going to come out. I don't think they will, but I'd rather get that sorted. So I've just put the clutch plate in the vice and on each sort of finger that sticks out and just bent it a fraction. So hopefully now that'll engage better. Back in here. I think we now have a clutch. That's, I think, is pretty much the main engine case sorted on the inside. It'll look a bit like an engine though now.